we spent the first segment of the course talking specifically about democracy, so that we would understand how to evaluate journalism within the frame of its contribution to democracy. Then we spent the bulk of the course talking about journalism. Journalism as a business, as an institution, as a set of practices, a set of routines. We kept talking about journalism. What we're going to do now is shift to talking about journalists. Right? I think this segment of the course wants to move from looking at the big picture of journalism as this institution that has a role within a democratic society and start talking more about you. Right? This is a more personal, it's a part of the course that I want to encourage you to reflect more on who you are. Right? Now, let's think a bit about who's in the room, because you're not all similarly situated. There's probably roughly, I'm going to sort of estimate, but probably roughly about a third of you who came into this class because you want to be journalists, whether or not you're a journalism major or not, and you'll leave this class still committed to a career in journalism. Okay? How many of you fit that category? You're pretty sure you want to work in journalism. Yeah. Okay, it's about a third, I guess, pretty close. All right? So for the remainder of this course, the focus, my goal in speaking to you, is to suggest you have to think about what kind of journalist you want to be. You're going to work in a system. What parts of that system are you going to embrace? Which parts of that system are you going to challenge? It's a space for you to think about what kind of journalist you want to be. Okay. There's probably also a chunk of folks in this class who came in not expecting to ever go into journalism. You might be majoring in something else. And you're going to leave with no interest in a career in journalism. How many fit that category? A fewer, but you're here, and the goal in this class for you, or at least my goal for you, is to become more intelligent readers of the news. In a sense, to give you some training that might help you be a better citizen. Right? So even though you're not going to be a journalist, it's still a very personal goal, right? That you can be more informed, more critical, and therefore be a better citizen. So that's maybe a third that are going to be journalists, clearly a third that are not going to be journalists. There's another third of you who are just confused. How many fit that category? Don't have a clue what the hell's going on. Raise them. There's nothing wrong with being confused. Confused is good. When you know, it's better than pretending you know what the hell you're doing. If you're driving a car, you don't know where you're going, and you pretend you know where you're going, what happens? You just get further and further away from the destination. Better to say, I don't know where I'm going. Let me at least ask for some advice. So for those of you who are confused, the goal, my goal in the remainder of this course is to confuse you even more. That can't hurt. All right. So I recognize that you're not all sitting in the same place. You don't all have the same goals. So we're going to try and make the remainder of the course important no matter what your goals might be. Okay. Now, part of that, whichever of those groups you belong to, part of that I want to emphasize is about how we think. Right? So take a minute and review this statement. Okay? We will engage in critique, which is not a solely negative enterprise and is not synonymous with complaining, whining, or mean-spiritedness. To critique an idea, a practice, or an institution is to examine it to determine its nature so that we can understand its possibilities and limitation. Critique can result in criticism, which can sometimes justifiably be harsh. But critique can also reveal the strength of an argument. Critique is a thoughtful enterprise, the goal of which is to deepen our understanding of an issue or a problem. That, to me, that's a very wise statement, yes? That must have been a smart, I bet you wrote that, wouldn't you think? That really reflects, I think, a deep understanding of the world, right? If I knew the guy who wrote that, I'd really pay attention to him, right? So does anybody recognize this? It's from our syllabus. Somebody who read the syllabus? Come on, don't be ashamed. That's good. You read the syllabus. That's from the first page of the syllabus. And I'm very serious about that. Whatever else we do in this course is always about thinking about what it means to be a critical thinker. Critique. Right? And it's very important to recognize that critique is not simply an attack. When you say I'm going to critique something, it doesn't just mean you're going for the jugular. Right? Critique is an intellectual practice. And that's what we're trying to do in this class. Now, that's important to mark because we spent a lot of time critiquing. So far we've critiqued some of the institutions within the republic based on democratic ideals in which we live. Spent a lot of the first part of the class critiquing contemporary democracy. We spent a whole lot of time critiquing corporate commercial journalism, mainstream journalism. And now we're moving into a portion of the class in which I've said we're going to read the work of what I consider to be an exemplary journalist, a journalist whom I admire, who I think does good work in the world. But that doesn't mean we're abandoning the critique. Even though I put the Pilger book on the syllabus because I think Pilger does good work, it doesn't mean that we simply celebrate John Pilger. You may come to a conclusion different than mine, but even if you agree that Pilger does good work, we can learn not simply by celebrating what he does, but by critiquing it, by trying to understand it more deeply. So we're moving to a different phase of the course, but we're not abandoning critique. And I don't expect that everybody will agree. There might be people who, in fact, think that Pilger is not an exemplary journalist. Some of you may come to the conclusion that he has failed as a journalist. That's fine. That's the goal here. Right. So I really want to keep that front and center. This is about critique. Whatever else you take away from this class, I would be happy if in the future that was part of a tangible part of the way you approach the world. Okay? Fair enough? Okay. Now, what I want to do next, remember we asked the question, what are journalists for? Over and over again. We're going to move to a different question. What is a journalist? Again, we're going to try and make it more personal. All right, we've talked about journalism as a practice, as an institution. But what does it mean to be a journalist? Maybe you've come to some conclusions about what you believe the role of journalism is in contemporary society. Maybe you've struggled with those quotes we put up on the screen earlier in the semester, different people's opinions about what journalism is for. But now I really do want to center this very personally. I want you all to think about who you are. All right? And to do that, I've never done this in class before. It's a little tricky, so bear with me. I hope it's not inappropriate. Right? But as you teach, you keep wanting to push yourself to see if you can find new ways to engage. So I'm a little nervous about this, but I'm going to ask you to bear with me on this, okay? I want you all to be bold. It might take some courage that you usually don't have to think about in the classroom. But I'm going to ask people to in a sense, come out. Right? I want you to be strong enough, honest enough, bold and brave enough to not be afraid to stand up and be who you are. Okay? I'm a little nervous. It's just, all right. I want to ask a question. And I want anybody who can answer yes to the question to have the courage to stand up and not just stand up, but stand up and look around the room and face every one of your classmates. Make eye contact and say, yes, this is true about me, and I'm not ashamed of it, okay? The question is very simple. How many of you in this room right now are intellectuals? You weren't supposed to laugh. Now, how many of you, if you are willing to say, I am an intellectual, stand up right now. Stand up proudly, face your classmates, and say, I, Bob Jensen, am an intellectual. If you can, I want to know who's got, this is gut check time, folks. We have two brave souls over here. Oh my goodness, 2, 4. I, oh my God, I am, and they rose one by one. I, am an intellectual. I am an intellectual. Is this it? Wait, don't sit down yet. Remember, turn around, look, face these people sitting down. Make the eye contact, connect to them. I am an intellectual. Who is willing to embrace the idea that you, oh my God, I knew you were going to come there. Good boy, good boy. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Is this all? I come in to the class and all right. You can sit down now. All right. So let's say there's about 200 people in the room. 10 of you stood up. The rest of you are morons, apparently. Yes? Yeah. So what's up with that, as they say? Now, here's the question. Why would the vast majority of you not be willing to stand up and say, I am an intellectual? Let's review the situation we're in here. We are at the University of Texas at Austin, correct? All right. This is one of the largest and most prestigious universities in Central Texas. No, not just in Central Texas, in all the nation. We have aspirations of being a world-class university, correct? That's what our president of the university says, right? It's not easy to get in here, correct? All of you have friends who applied to the University of Texas and were denied admission, correct? You are the cream of the state of Texas, the most sacred, holy, and special place in the world. And you are here at the University of Texas, which is dedicated to the life of the mind, yes? In those moments when there's no football game going on. But basically, the life of the mind. I mean, why are we here? Are we here to play video games? That was a trick question. Are we here to seek out fake IDs so that we can go to 6th Street and drink while we're underage? Is that why we're here? No. Those may be activities. Football, video games, underage drinking. I'm not endorsing any of them, quite frankly. I don't engage in any of them personally, but that's not why we're here, folks. You're not paying money to be here for that. You can do those things without being in college, in case nobody told you. You don't need to be in college to go to football games, to play video games, or to get drunk. All of those things are available to anyone. Okay? So, if we're here for the life of the mind, why will only a very small number of you stand up and say, I'm an intellectual? Well, here's why I think. Because intellectual is a term that we're not really very comfortable with. So, for instance, in my family, my sister, who's an attorney, and a very bright person, I mean, you know, she can hold her own in most any situation. She'll often introduce me. She'll say, oh, this is my brother Bob. He's the intellectual of the family. And when she says that, she doesn't say it in a way that suggests admiration. You know what I mean? It's like, he's the intellectual. In that case, what she means is, he's the long-winded, pompous son bitch who got a bunch of degrees and thinks he's smarter than everybody. Right? That, when somebody says, I'm an intellectual, I mean, if you were at a party and you met somebody new, what do? Well, I'm an intellectual. You would probably say, oh, I got to go get a drink. I'll be right back. You know, when people proclaim themselves to be intellectuals, often it's with a bit of arrogance and snobbishness. Okay, so one of the reasons we don't perhaps like to identify as intellectuals is because it's associated with a certain kind of arrogance, correct? So that might be one reason you don't want to do it. But maybe the reason is because you haven't thought about what it means to be an intellectual. And in some sense, just by virtue of being here, because you have the privilege, in a sense, of taking time out from life to be in a classroom to think by yourself, think collectively, you've got to be engaged in intellectual work. Okay. And maybe the reason people don't want to stand up and identify as intellectuals is because we don't really know what that means. And because we're in a culture that sometimes sort of pokes fun at people who claim to be intellectuals, that we're not sure we want to be in that category. So